Hi guys, Mark here, and today we're going to go through the basics of Adobe Photoshop. So this is for you guys who are just complete beginners. If you're doing any courses in design, photography, anything in multimedia, or in fact any course at all, your work can be really improved with the simplest techniques in Photoshop. So today we're only going to go through starting a new page and just a general look at the Photoshop interface just to get you familiar with it. As I say, it's completely beginners, so we're just going to go slow at it. We're going to take a wee look around it and just get you familiar with it before you start creating all these wonderful pieces. I'm using CS 5.5. There is a newer version, CS 6, but Photoshop generally has the same interface with a few new features on each upgrade, but the same rules, tend to apply throughout really. So if you have the grasp of any of the CS Photoshop software, well then you're going to fly through any of them. So first things first, if you open up Photoshop, this is what you're greeted with. Now, this is the default settings in Photoshop. Nothing's opened here now. If you want to go File, New, Photoshop has great pre-installed presets already in it. If you know the sizes of what you're trying to create, well then you can just add it or type it in here, width and height and stuff like that there. But if it's just something simple like an A4 page, well then you just go International Paper A4, and Photoshop already has them sizes already installed with it. And same for photos. Everything's there that you want, even stuff for if you're making for film. It has HDV, 1080p, so it's worth taking a wee look through each one of those presets, for something that you might be using it for. But as I said before, if it's a size that you already know you want, well then just hit the size, type it in, and away you go. But for this, I'll just do International Paper and A4. Now, an important thing to think about is your color mode. Now, the color mode is important when you're setting up your page. Here you'll see RGB color. Now, RGB stands for red, green and blue, which are the colors that make up any computer screen or TV screen. So if you're designing for the likes of your web or video, then you need to choose RGB mode. And then the other mode is CMYK. CMYK stands for cyan, magenta, yellow and black, which for any of you who have ever changed ink in your printers know that CMYK colour mode is for things that you're going to design for print. Now the rest of these here now, at the moment, are quite unimportant. I wouldn't worry yourself with them. Grayscale is just black and white. But if, usually more or less you're only ever using RGB or CMYK. So for this I'll just leave it at RGB. So all you do then is hit OK, and there we have our page to work with. So that's everything. Now you've started up a new file. Now you want to look now at the general interface of Photoshop. On this top bar here is just a normal menu bar. With any other application, it's normally the same. This all modes, adjustments. If you just work your way through them and just take a look at what to do with different things, with different tools and stuff, they are going to change throughout. For example, I have my page open there. If I go image rotation, 90 degrees, that changes my image from changes my image from portrait to landscape. So it's wee bits like that there that come in handy when you're designing in Photoshop. Now the first thing I want to go through here is the toolbar. It's just exactly what it says in the tin. It's just all the tools that you ever will need for working in Photoshop. For example here, if I go down here, every one of those tools, if you hover over them, will tell you exactly what they are. So if I want to make a rectangle here, just click, and there you have your rectangle. Simple as that. And then if you hit your move tool, all them tools all do something. But we'll get into them more as the series goes on. If another place we want to look is the application bar. Up here is the application bar. They usually hear something. Usually, I never really use that much. It's to do with bridging with other programs, and here's a zoom level if there's 50% or stuff like that there. Um, Different windows. You can change about all the windows to whatever size and configuration you want. But as I say, I haven't really used it that much. Below that, then we have the options bar. Now, with any tool that you select, this options bar is going to change. So there at the minute we have the move tool, and you can see up here there's all different options for that tool. And then if we go to the next one, there you are. The options bar changes with that particular tool. So whenever you're choosing what tool you want, you should always take a wee glance up here at your options bar just to see, because the tool you're simply picking next of the eraser tool. So the eraser tool is not just eraser. You can go up here and there's so many different options for that eraser, and there's different sizes, hardness, the brush, pencil, block, the opacity. So there at the minute the opacity is at 100%. You can change that down or whatever, and it's the same throughout the entire each of them tools. The options bar changes for that particular tool, so it's worth going through each of them tools and taking a look at what you can actually achieve with each individual tool. Over here we have our panel. It just really is with swatches and styles. You can change your different next to them colors and stuff. You can change different. Like here are more pre-installed presets. See if I click on there, will change that shape. They're pretty generic depending on what you want. I've never really used them in a project, but they could come in handy sometimes depending on what you're doing. Now Photoshop, this is the main aspect I suppose that people kind of need to get in their heads when designing Photoshop, is that Photoshop is a layers program. Whenever you're designing things, you're layering pictures and images and text one on top of the other, and down here is where your layers sits. You'll always, when we start a new file, will get a background which is locked, which will always kind of sit there. Whenever you create something new, for example, at the minute there we have my rectangle. If it's highlighted, hit delete, it's gone. But if I start another one, there we are, back again. If I create another one, there's another one. Now, like anything, these layers, shape 2 is sitting on top of shape 1. If I double click here, I can change the color of one. We'll do something a bit brighter. And if I move that up, well, now you can see that shape 2 is on top of shape 1. And I can actually change this under, and now shape 1's on top of shape 2. Very simple. I know it sounds too simple, but it's something you just need to get your head around, and they're so useful when designing. So to summarise what we looked over the other day, we looked at RGB and CMYK and the differences in them when designing for web, for screen and for print. We took a look over the interface where everything is in Photoshop. And we also looked over at layers and how we layer things up on the palette, on that image, on the page. Going forward, people tend to be quite maybe sometimes afraid of programs on Photoshop. Going forward, you really should go through it yourself. You should be taking your own initiative to go through each tool and really play with it, mess about with it. You can not do any harm to Photoshop. It doesn't care if you get bait, X out of it, start a new one. And that's really the best advice you could get with Photoshop, especially when you're beginning. There's no harm in it.